Good morning, Andy. Thought Andy had joined me. And who do we have with us this morning? Frank, how are you doing this morning? Minus 12. Well, God bless. Angie, good morning. I hope our audio is a little better than it was last week. We had sketchy audio problems last week for some reason, kept kicking in and out a little bit. Bill, thank you. Hey, we got to get that book to you. Minus 12. We have about a week or two of real winter here in Kingman every year, and this yesterday and this coming week, it's going to be mid 60s all week. Just about perfect temperatures. You know, the coldest temperature I've ever experienced, I was up in the North Country, and we had an honest, I was working out of Ashland, Wisconsin, Duluth. We had an actual 40 below one morning without wind chill.
Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, mi amigos. Last week we explored Route 66 in New Mexico. I ran a bit over our half-hour schedule as there was just so much to share. Even then, it was sort of like a Reader's Digest condensed tour. I just skimmed the surface, and I have plans to return to the Land of Enchantment on a future program. I can easily fill a program that just focuses on Albuquerque. This morning, we continue our westward journey along Route 66 with a tour of Arizona, the Grand Canyon state. And I got to tell you, even if we ride hell for leather, it's going to be hard to keep this to a half hour. I do hope that you don't mind if I run a bit over. But let's start this morning's program with a little bit of a teaser. Driving east to west along Route 66 into Arizona, you enter the state through a magic portal, jaw-dropping natural beauty, and a swirl of trading posts. Some of these trading posts are just throwbacks to the 1950s. Others are modern incarnations. They all have one thing in common. They're a blending of trading post, mini mart, and tourist trap. They're a bit more politically correct than they used to be when there were signs along the highway that said, "Stop, see, live Indian." And that is our opening teaser. Now, let's take care of a bit of business. First, I want to give a shout out to the boys of the road crew for our theme song. This morning, rather than just promote their wonderful road trip inspiring tunes that you can listen to on their website at roadcrew66.com, I thought it'd be kind of nice to put a face with the names. Don and Jason, Joe and Woody. You can also order CDs on their website. I know these are a bit antiquated, but trust me, tunes from the road crew are ideal theme songs for your adventure on Route 66. And I need to give a shout out to a few of our sponsors. We'll start with Victoria Sugar Shack in Kingman, Arizona. This is my go-to place for a raspberry and cream-filled cruffin and a hot cup of delicious coffee. And it's a favorite date spot for my dearest friend and me on a cold winter's morning when she's got the fire going. Next up is Jenny Joy's homemade soaps, beeswax wrappings, and pinyon pine products such as salve. You know, I can truthfully say, after tangling with an ant den last year, I can testify to the almost magical powers of the pinyon pine salve. And we have the Wagon Wheel Motel in Cuba, Missouri. In this almost magical time capsule, the past and present blend seamlessly. Last but not least, Route 66 Navigation, your personal tour guide to the most famous highway in America. Add a few of their other products, such as the Mother Road Route 66 Passport, and you have everything needed to make memories with worry-free travel on legendary Route 66. Check it out at route66navigation.com. And we haven't forgotten our trivia contest. That'll be coming up in a few minutes. I-40 has buried most of Route 66 between Lupton at the state line and Holbrook. In fact, Route 66 has either been buried or segmented almost all the way to Crookton Road between Ash Fork and Seligman. Still, if you don't mind a bit of dust on the wheels, or if you're up for a short walkabout, you can explore sections of the various alignments of Route 66. And there's, as always, there are rewards for people with an adventuresome spirit. As an example, there's a short segment of Route 66 that is part paved and part graded gravel road. The reward is the beautiful Corino Canyon, the scenic bridge, and the ruins of the trading post that once stood along the highway at the east end of the bridge. Do keep in mind, though, this is on reservation property, and sometimes they can be kind of picky about photos. Another example of the gems awaiting discovery for the adventuresome is the remnants of the Painted Desert trading post, marooned high on a hill that overlooks the Painted Desert along a long abandoned segment of Route 66. This section is accessed via the Pinta Road exit. You'll need the access code for the gate, but that's obtained by following the directions that are posted there. This section of old Route 66 is pretty rough in spots, but it is well worth the drive to the trading post, and I suggest even continuing west over the old bridge that spans the Dead River. At the fence for the Petrified Forest National Park, the trip kind of comes to an abrupt end, but you can see the highway continuing across the colorful desert. This trading post was always remote. It never had electricity and closed after this section of highway was bypassed in a 1956 realignment. A few years ago, a group of Route 66 enthusiasts purchased the property, and they have worked tirelessly to stabilize and preserve the old trading post. They have squared it up, reshored the foundation, put a new roof on it. I highly recommend that particular detour. The Petrified Forest National Park is the only national park traversed by Route 66. It is well worth a detour. I suggest the drive through the park and then continuing to Holbrook on US 180. The Painted Desert Inn is now a visitor center. It was built of petrified wood and other native stone. The Painted Desert Inn was the vision of Herbert David Lohr, and he registered the inn with the land office in 1924 and fulfilled his responsibilities under the Homesteading Act. For almost 12 years, he operated what he called the Stone Tree House as a tourist attraction. Visitors could eat meals in the lunchroom, purchase American Indian arts and crafts, and enjoy a cool drink in the downstairs tap room. 6 small rooms, they were really almost like cubicles, were available for $2 to $4 per night. Lohr also gave 2-hour motor car tours through the black forest of the Painted Desert below the inn. Now, Holbrook took a real hard hit when Route 66 was bypassed after completion of I-40. Within 1 year, more than a dozen businesses had closed. Even today, the Route 66 corridor is lined with long shuttered buildings. But the town has a lot to offer if you're up for a bit of exploring. Case in point is one of my favorites, the Arizona Rancho. Now, this is on the south side of the tracks in a worn-out old residential district along what was once the National Old Trails Road. This is the oldest commercial structure in Holbrook. It's been closed for about a year, quite a few years. It had a fire that damaged the main building, and its fate is uncertain. It'd sure be a shame to lose this neat old place. And scattered all along the Route 66 corridor in the historic business district are vestiges and tangible links from the town's association with the National Old Trails Road and Route 66. There are also tangible links to the town's railroad and frontier history, such as the picturesque old depot and the Bucket of Blood Saloon on Bucket of Blood Street. You gotta love a town that has a street named Bucket of Blood. Built in 1898, the old Navajo County Courthouse is an interesting museum. And, boy, I got to tell you, be sure to go to the basement and explore the old jail. Some amazing artwork. And one of the things that's really neat about the jail, it was installed in the basement when the courthouse was built. And it was almost unchanged. And it was used up into the 1960s. Kind of a macabre little dark humor note. In 1899, George Smiley was hung in the courtyard, and Sheriff Frank Watron was reprimanded by President McKinley for issuing a cheerfully worded invitation to the event. Even worse, he handed it out to a lot of the kids to take home to their parents. He was a school superintendent. The Wigwam Motel is a Route 66 landmark that opened in 1950. Joe and Aggie opened their original cafe along Route 66 in 1943, and they moved it to the current location in 1965. The food is excellent, but I'm torn between this cafe and Romo's across the street. So if I'm in Holbrook, I usually have breakfast at Joe and Aggie's. And if I'm in town for dinner, boy, I go to Romo's. I really, really greatly enjoy their tostadas and enchiladas. Good eats. And here's one that's often missed by a lot of people. The Blevins House is a private residence. It's a few blocks from the depot, about a dozen blocks off Route 66. It was here in 1887 that Apache County Sheriff Commodore Perry Owens engaged in an amazing shootout with members of the Blevins gang. The shootout is largely forgotten today, but it was an epic, even though it only lasted a few minutes. And the short version is, the sheriff came out on top without a scratch, and 5 members of the Blevins gang, well, they got to visit the Undertaker. As a side note, Owens later lived in Seligman, and his home is still standing there. If you continue west on Route 66, you're going to have to jump on and off I-40. You can cruise through Joseph City. There's a lot of neat stuff to see there. And on the west side of town, there's some abandoned trading posts. But there are also some great links to that highway's glory days. The Geronimo Trading Post, they claim to have the world's largest petrified log. It opened in 1950, still in operation. And the legendary Jackrabbit Trading Post opened in 1949. And it's been operated by the same family since 1961. I highly recommend a stop. This is stepping back into the 1950s. And Cindy and Tony, they're just wonderful people. But there is another option if you want to skip I-40 and jumping back and forth. This is as close to time travel as you're going to get, especially if you make the trip in something like a Model T or Model A Ford. What it is Laws Road and Territorial Road. It's a graded gravel track between Holbrook and Winslow. It was once the National Old Trails Road. Now, I don't have a clue why, but the state recently spent a huge amount of money completely restoring this bridge. They actually closed it, jacked it up, put new footings under it, new decking. I don't know why they did it, but I'm glad. This was the very first highway bridge authorized by the newly minted state of Arizona. The canyon and bridge are framed by stunning landscapes, and it makes it really hard to take a bad photograph. The bridge and the canyon were featured on popular postcards during the era of the National Old Trails Road. And it was attractions such as this that led to the National Old Trails Road being rerouted across northern Arizona. And it was the scenic wonders, the native culture, the fascinating frontier era towns, and a deep romanticism of the Southwest that fueled an ever-growing number of tourists in Arizona. On the afternoon of February 13th, I will be hosting a fun-filled, fast-paced live stream program about the romanticism of the Southwest. It's a story filled with Spanish conquistadors, lost civilizations, culture clashes, lost treasure, tall tales, colorful characters, and visionaries like Fred Harvey. I do hope that you'll be able to join me for this special adventure. Winslow is best known for standing on the corner park, but history, food, and vintage lodging are what keeps me coming back. The renovated Earl's Route 66 Motor Court started as the Marble Motel that opened in 1947, and the astounding La Posada that opened in 1930. Now that has to be included in any Winslow visit. The food is a bit spendy, but it's absolutely superb, and the setting is without equal. The entire complex looks like a living time capsule. Incredibly, it was fully gutted and transformed into offices in the late 1950s. Then it was gutted again in the early 90s and was scheduled for demolition. Alan Affeldt, he's the fellow who restored the Castaneda over in Las Vegas, New Mexico. He acquired the property and, with a painstaking eye for detail, has restored it to its original splendor. Personally, I can't imagine taking on a project like this. I gotta tell you, as much as I appreciate history, I would have been hard-pressed to pee on the old place if it was on fire, because it was less than a shell when he started. Excuse me. Hey, another great little gem there is the Falcon restaurant. Now, the Falcon looks a bit rough around the edges on the outside, but don't let that put you off. The food is excellent. And the restaurant is a time capsule. It was established in 1955 by Jim, George, and Pete Chrysostomus, Greek immigrants. And in the era before I-40, the highway between Winslow and Winona was lined with trading posts. Each may have been a bit of a tourist trap, but each had an interesting backstory. For example, the long-vanished Hopi House was established by Ray Meany, a big band leader from Hawaii, and his wife, Ella Blackwell, who later opened the somewhat bizarre Old Frontier Trading Post west of Joseph City. Capitalizing on the natural wonder that was Meteor Crater, Joseph Schreiber built a service station at the road junction with Route 66 in 1938. In 1941, Jack Newsom acquired the property and established a gift shop trading post complex that he dubbed Meteor City. He put up a sign that said Population 1. When he married, the sign was changed to Population 2. After a fire in 1990, the Meteor City was rebuilt as a geodesic dome. It was closed for quite a few years, but renovation has commenced. And this property, for a little bit of trivia, it appeared in the movie Starman with Jeff Bridges. Now, Two Guns. This is a neat place. It's another spot. I could easily do an entire program on Two Guns and Canyon Diablo. Building a bridge over the canyon in 1881 almost bankrupted the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. And the construction camp turned town became known as one of the most lawless places in Arizona. At one time, they had more than 20 shootings in 1 month. Shortly after the National Old Trails Road Bridge was built in 1915, you can see that there at the bottom of the screen, Canyon Lodge Store and Camp was opened. Earl Cundriff acquired the property in the early 1920s, and you can see the ruins just across the bridge there. Shortly afterwards, he leased part of the property to a really shady character named Harry Miller. He went by the name of Indian Miller or Chief Crazy Thunder. Miller established a zoo and a trading post. A year or so later, there was kind of a disagreement and argument. Well, Miller shot and killed Cundriff. On the right on your screen, that's where Cundriff fell. His body was found there by the police in the doorway. Excuse me, on the left. Using court transcripts and newspaper stories from the era, I chronicled the story of the Cundriff murder and a most unusual and bizarre trial in my newest book. And you can order autographed copies of Murder and Mayhem on the Main Street of America, Tales from Bloody 66, on the Jim Hinckley's America website. How's that for a bit of sneaking in a bit of shameless self-promotion? Another chapter in the Two Guns story pertains to Remy Jim Giddings, a very colorful character. He had a graveyard by the trading post that he claimed was for salesmen. And he placed a speaker in the two-seat outhouse and played rattlesnake noises, or asked people to move to the other hole as they were blocking the light. Practical jokes were a specialty. Giddings died in 1943, but he was so famous that for years travelers stopped in the hopes of seeing him. The distinctive ruins of his trading post with the round tower and observation platform still stand. They're counted among the many ruins at Two Guns. Now, this large color picture is of the ruins from Harry Miller's place. This is where Cundriff was murdered. The small picture is Remy Jim's. There are also remains from the later trading post and zoo built when Route 66 was realigned, and there's ruins near the bridge of the original Canyon Lodge. The town site of Canyon Diablo is a few miles to the north on the other side at I-40. And as the song says, we must not forget Winona. Winona was always just a wide spot in the road, and it hasn't changed much. Pretty much just a gas station. But from this wide spot in the road, there are two options. One is to follow the original alignment of Route 66 into Flagstaff, past the old Walnut Canyon Bridge, or you can follow I-40 to the exit for Walnut Canyon National Monument, and then follow Route 66 into Flagstaff. I highly recommend taking time to tour Walnut Canyon. The visitor center is really interesting, and they have amazing views into the canyon that are actually dizzying. And if you're ambitious, there are miles of paved trails with lots and lots of stairs that provide access to the canyon and the cliff dwellings. Flagstaff is a modern town that has embraced its past. But for me, the crush of traffic along the Route 66 corridor is a big turnoff. But there are lots of Route 66 vestiges and quite a few places that predate statehood. The distinctive Museum Club opened as a taxidermy studio and museum in 1931, was converted into a nightclub in 1936. Sadly, due to COVID, permanent closure was just announced. My go-to spot for lunch in Flagstaff is Ms. Zips. It opened in 1942 as Trixie's Diner. Good burgers there, really good burgers. My advice is to park at the Visitor Center, which is in the old train depot, and explore the business district on foot. At the Visitor Center, you can get information about the innovative self-guided tour that uses QR codes. I wish we had more time for a detailed program, but that's coming soon in a series of pay-per-view programs that I am developing. So this morning we're going to have to skip the Parks General Store that opened in 1921 and move right on to Williams. The business district of Williams is easily walked from end to end, and that is my recommendation. There's two one-way corridors, so walk Route 66 to one end of town and come back on the other side, on the other street. This way you can savor the vibrant feel. This town is really dynamic and historic. It's hard to believe that 30 years ago so many buildings were closed. You'd never know that today. But of course, one of the advantages to walking Route 66 in Williams is you can work up an appetite, especially if you do it in the winter when it's a tad bit cold. I have two primary dining recommendations. Excuse me. I really like Rod's. They opened in 1946, and it's a good steakhouse, but they got all kinds of food. But that is a really good place for dinner. But one of my favorites in Williams, and to be honest, it makes my top 10 list for Route 66 restaurants, is Pine Country. Every day they bake a variety of fresh pies, and the menu options are unique and reasonably priced. Try the shepherd's pie. It's really superb. The only better shepherd's pie I have ever had on Route 66 is at the Ariston Cafe in Litchfield, Illinois. Before I-40 was completed, travelers had a white-knuckle ride down the Ash Fork grade. It's still a steep hill, but you don't deal with narrow two-lane highway or the switchbacks. Ash Fork took quite a beating in the last half of the 20th century, and it really shows. But this is a town with a rich history, and it deserves far more than just a quick drive-through or a bypass. For travelers on the Native American trade route that connected the tribes in northern Arizona with those on the California coast, and several centuries of European and American explorers, the confluence of the three tributaries of Ash Creek was an important oasis. The town itself dates to 1882, shortly after completion of the railroad to this point, and it boomed as a transportation center and as a hub for area ranching, flagstaff quarrying, as well as logging. It also became a center for railroad activity, especially with completion of a line that connected Phoenix with the main line at Ash Fork in 1895. As with many western towns, it was plagued by fire. The first to decimate the business district was in 1893. As an indication of the town's importance, in 1907, the railroad built the elegant Escalante Harvey House. The economy was enhanced and diversified with establishment of the National Old Trails Highway and then Route 66. In the early 1950s, the railroad closed its repair facilities and laid new tracks several miles north of town. Then the Escalante closed in 1951, was torn down in 1968. What a loss. In 1977 and again in 1987, major fires destroyed sections of the business district. Then in 1979, Route 66 was bypassed. But there are some real treasures to be found in Ashford. One is Lulu Bells. They serve first-rate barbecue. Another is the forlorn old copper state court that opened in 1928. Well, I can see we're not going to stay to our half-hour schedule. I hope you don't mind. We're going to run a tad bit over here. You pick up Route 66 at the Crookton Road exit, west of Ashford. This is where you begin the longest remaining uninterrupted segment of Route 66. It's billed as 160 miles of smiles for good reason. It's a bit of a misnomer because the drive is only about 157 miles, depending on which alignment you follow. Seligman suffered a similar fate to Ashford. The Harvey House closed and was razed. There were a couple of fires. The town was bypassed. But leaders like Angel Delgadillo took the proverbial bull by the horn, stirred some enthusiasm in the community, and harnessed the growing interest in Route 66. And as a result, the town is now a destination. There are times when it seems busier than if it were announced they were having free beer. There are some great Route 66 landmarks. But for me, the town seems to have a Disneyland type veneer. Still, I got two great dining recommendations. One is West Side Lilo's with excellent authentic German food and American fare. And the Roadkill Cafe, which happens to be our coffee cup sponsor of the day. From Seligman to Kingman, the old highway flows through some pretty spectacular country out across the Aubrey Valley and down through Truxton Canyon. Many of the old roadside businesses, such as Deer Lodge and Hyde Park, that was promoted with signs reading, "Park your Hyde tonight at Hyde Park," are gone. A few, such as Grand Canyon Caverns, have been given a new lease on life with refurbishment and the addition of new attractions, such as in-cave dining room and an in-cave motel room, as well as spelunking tours. Other points of interest on this section of the road include Keepers of the Wild, the ghost town of Hackberry, the old Indian school in Valentine, the Hackberry General Store, and in Terrace Point with Giganticus Heticus. Most of the businesses associated with Route 66 have been erased in Peach Springs on the Wallapai Reservation. Still, there are a few of special note, including the old Osterman Station that dates to the 1920s, and the Wallapai Forestry Office that opened as the Wallapai Trading Post in about 1921. You might also cruise the Kingman Airport and Industrial Park. There's a great cafe at the terminal with really nice, just excellent omelets. But there's also lots of remnants from when this was the Kingman Army Airfield during World War II, including an original control tower. And if you cross to the north side of Route 66 and drive down the dirt road half mile, you can find the pillboxes in the old gunnery range. Route 66 in Kingman is signed as Andy Devine Avenue. This is one hint of the town's rich celebrity history. The entire corridor is lined with tangible links to Route 66 history. As an example, the Ramada Inn opened as the Holiday Inn in 1964. The El Trovador Motel opened in 1939. The Hilltop Motel, which is now being refurbished, dates to 1955. The Arcadia opened in 1939. The Siesta Motel opened in 1929. And the White Rock Court was one of only two motels listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book. It was built in 1936, and the other motel was Hood's Court. And whatever you do, don't miss Beale Street when you're in Kingman. It's just one block off Route 66 in the historic business district. This is the heart of the Renaissance. Microbreweries, a wine bar, a diverse array of interesting restaurants, and on the first Saturday of every month, April through October, chillin' on Beale. Just an old-fashioned cruise night. Also, don't miss the Powerhouse Visitor Center and Route 66 Museum or the Mojave Museum of History and Arts. All highly recommended. The National Old Trails Road and Route 66 funneled thousands upon thousands of travelers through town. In 1939, it was noted that more than 1 million travelers had entered Arizona on Route 66. In 1915, one of those travelers was none other than Edsel Ford, son of Henry Ford. And some of you youngsters thought Edsel was just the name of a car that looked like a Buick sucking a lemon. Kingman has a long and rich celebrity association. Excuse me. The first major motion picture was filmed in the area back in 1918. Carol Lombard and Clark Gable, they were married in Kingman, March of 1939. Pamela Anderson had an encounter with a local police for indecent exposure during a Playboy photo shoot. And highly recommend Edge of Eternity. Take a look at that film, all filmed around Oatman, most of it in Kingman. It gives you a great view of Route 66 Kingman in the 1950s. Now, as you leave Kingman, you'll be driving down this long canyon through the west of town. If you look toward your left, you'll see an old road down at the bottom of the canyon. That's the National Old Trails Road and Route 66 before 1937. After 1952, Route 66 essentially followed what is now I-40 through Yucca to the Colorado River. Interestingly enough, after 1914, this route was listed as the Valley Cutoff on the National Old Trails Road. The older alignment of Route 66 is, in my humble opinion, the most scenic section of Route 66, hands down. A one-eyed blind man cannot take a bad picture. Stevie Wonder would take good pictures out here. And there's lots of history, as well as the steepest grades and sharpest curves found anywhere on Route 66. Cool Springs, that was built in 1926, has been rebuilt to original appearance. It burned in 1966 and was blown up in the movie Universal Soldier. Ed's Camp has been closed since the 1970s, but it dates to the early 1920s. My first paying job was for old man Edgerton, tending his garden there at Ed's Camp. On the west side of the pass is the remnants of Gold Road. This is a mining camp that operated on again and off again from 1903 to 1942. After the final closure to beat tax liabilities, all the buildings were razed. A little bit of an historic footnote for you. N.R. Dutton had a garage here. Jack Rittenhouse mentioned he had a towing service, pull cars over the pass. Dutton built Cool Springs, and he established Dutton Motors in Kingman. His nephew Roy, who was the tow truck driver back in the late 30s and 40s, was the D in Mr. D's Route 66 diner in Kingman. Now, Oatman was a ghost town that has been reborn as a tourist mecca. It dates to the early 20th century. It has two major claims to fame. One is the wild burros in the street that dispel the myth that all the asses are in Washington. The other is the Oatman Hotel and the legend of the Clark Gable Carol Lombard honeymoon. Well, all I can say about that is, though the couple did marry in Kingman late one afternoon, but they were in Los Angeles the next morning at 8 o'clock for a press conference. I'll let you fill in the blanks. But the old town is lots of fun. And food. Hey, try the Buffalo Burger at the Oatman Hotel. The drive to the Colorado River from Oatman is scenic and pleasant. If you do this in the summer, though, be prepared. Even an old desert rat like me has trouble. Temperatures along that river often exceed 120 degrees. A true oasis along the river is the Havasu National Wildlife Refuge, one of the last riparian areas on the upper Colorado River, and the Topok Resort. Well, we've ran a little bit over this morning, but I hope you don't mind. We're going to close out the Arizona adventure with the Old Trails Bridge that opened in 1916. The decking was removed in 1947, and it carries pipelines today. This bridge put an end to the ferry that had operated near Topok since the late 1850s. And as a little bit of a footnote, that bridge appears in the 1940 film adaptation of The Grapes of Wrath. The bottom picture where it's color Route 66, Arizona 66, Colorado River, that bridge was the old railroad bridge. It was built in the late 1890s. And it was converted to a highway bridge and opened in 1947 when a new railroad bridge was built. Well, once again, we overran our half-hour schedule, and I apologize if the tour seemed a bit rushed, but consider this just a bit of road trip inspiration of the Grand Canyon State and a teaser for some upcoming programs that I have planned. Next week on Coffee with Jim, we continue our westward Route 66 adventure through the state of California. This is probably the most diverse state on the Route 66 corridor. We start with the interesting old town of Needles, cross the vast empty of the Mojave Desert, and brave the crush of traffic in the greater Los Angeles area. I'm confident that you'll be quite surprised by some of what I have to share. And before we get to your questions and wrap things up for the week, let's get to the trivia question. The first major picture along the Route 66 corridor in western Arizona was filmed after World War I, shortly before certification of Route 66. Do you know the name of the movie, and who was the star? First right answer, autographed copy of Things to Do on Route 66 Before You Die. My kind of a top 10 list of some of my favorite places. Well, now we're going to answer a few of your questions, and then we'll wrap her up for the week and see what we can come up for you. Mr. Frank Jameson is with us. He says it's a nice, balmy -12. Always good to have Angie with us. Bill, good morning. Wind chill -27. No, thank you. Well, Mike, 15 below. I've been out here. I paid my dues in some of the North Country, but I've been out here so long. I'm one of the dry roasted nuts, and it gets below 80, and I wear my long underwear. Yesterday, I went out for a long desert walk after I finished up the day's projects, and was wearing a vest and long sleeve shirt, and it was 60 degrees. I don't even own a short sleeve shirt. Isn't that something? Good morning, Mr. Carter, all the way from Louisville, Kentucky. Frank, I do have a spare room. We just have to move some toolboxes and workbenches and a few things like that. Mark, good morning. I think we all need a road trip, Mark. Down there in the valley, it is nice in the winter, but come summer, that's just too. I like the heat, but that's just way too much of a good thing. Well, good morning, all the way from Holbrook. Miss Maggie from Michigan, and Keith Kentner here from Kingman, Arizona. Painted Desert Trading Post, you betcha. Sherry, good morning. Oh, John, I did not know that. Great. That's you work at the Jackrabbit Trading Post, right? Brian, good morning. Mesa Italiana Restaurant. Well, we'll add that to the list. Cindy and Tony are just a real delight. Yes, I did neglect to mention that. If you the Jackrabbit Trading Post, you can get a mileage sign. How far it is from the Jackrabbit Trading Post to, you fill in the blanks, your house. Yeah, there's a lot to see here. The section through Oatman is just absolutely wonderful. And that is where Standing on a Corner in Winslow, Arizona gets its name. It's from the Eagles. They did a really, really great job, the city of Winslow, capitalizing on that. John, I'll look for that. I haven't been up that way. My travel plans kind of got curtailed last year, to say the very least. Meteor Crater is a neat place. It's not. It's really surprising how nice it is. Good morning, Miss Jean Bishop. How are you doing today? David? Well, thank you for that plug, Bill. I'm glad you liked the book, Murder and Mayhem. It's a good project. Good morning, Andy. And Linda Hobbs? Gosh. Yeah, well, 89 to Sunset Crater and Wapatki is really neat. Continue up to Wapatki is really, really a fascinating old lost abandoned city up there. But Sunset Crater. Andy, I don't see why not. It sounds like a great idea. Yeah, the Pine Country restaurant, like I say, it is really one on the top 10 list. Frank, you were right. Lilo cinnamon rolls are spectacular. Yeah, the German type marking on the Indian buildings, you notice that. There's also some bridges here in Arizona, older ones, that have the swastika. The swastika kind of got a bad name. The folks there in Germany in the 1930s kind of gave it a bad name, but it was a Native American symbol, and it had nothing to do with the Nazis. Mr. D's, Hot Rod Cafe, all good eating. Yeah, Mr. D's was opened in 1939, Andy, as the Chemo Cafe. K-I for Kingman, M-O for Mojave County. You're right. The Wigwam Motel in Holbrook and in Rialto inspired the Cozy Cone Motel in the original movie, Disney movie Pixar, Cars. Yeah, I think that was the best. Cars was the best of the series. I've only seen the second one, and it was okay as a good kids movie, but Cars itself was for everyone. You're exactly right. Well, it's been used by a lot of cultures, Linda, the swastika. But like I say, it got bad connotations with our folks that particular time period. Never be the same. I never had Linda's garlic burgers in Topak, but I do love garlic. Keith, thank you. And Linda, Sherry, my pleasure. Thank you, Linda. Frank, God bless. Don Nicholson, only -2 here in Kingman. Well, no thank you. Bill, I sure will. I'll check Messenger as soon as we get freed up here. Yeah, Carlsbad, New Mexico is pretty nice. I'll tell you an area that's really overlooked a lot. I spent a lot of time working around Silver City, New Mexico, just on the other side of the state. Oh, okay, John. I'm sorry. You work at the Petrified Forest. Well, that's a neat place. I love the drive through the Petrified Forest, most definitely. Folks, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Couple notes real quick. Next Saturday, 2 o'clock, I'll be doing a special presentation on the Romanticism of the Southwest live stream, 2 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Next Sunday morning, Coffee with Jim will be running through Route 66 in California. And we've also got next Saturday, 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, we're going to get a live stream tour of the Cactus Inn Motel in McLean, Texas. The folks there, the new owners, have been working tirelessly to renovate the property and give it a new lease on life. So we're looking forward to that as well. My friends, as always, thank you for joining us this morning. And until we meet again, take care. And invite your friends next week. Let's make it a coffee party. And parting thoughts for the day. See if you can brighten somebody's day this week. Simple. Take it easy, my friends. Vaya con Dios.